On this channel, I've talked about games I've enjoyed a great deal, both to share with anyone interested in those experiences and express a passion. One I've mentioned multiple times is Shadow of the Colossus. I picked up the remastered collection for the PlayStation 3, and ever since, that game's grip has transcended years and refused to let go. But that has led to a problem. I haven't found another game that scratches that itch. I'll see similar components in games, large boss fights, emotionally compelling tales, or an atmosphere of mystery, but ultimately not quite as impactful as that experience. So a month ago, I played again to see if it held up by my own standards or if a good chunk was nostalgia. When I hit those credits, I thought, nope, it's still great. If you saw the previous video to this one, suggesting you replay your favorite games, consider this a sequel where I use that prompt as a vehicle to re-examine this personal classic. Because with age and more playtime, I can better articulate what I find compelling about this game originally released on the PlayStation 2 in 2005, and why I still hold it in such high regard even with decades of great games that have been released. With that said, this video will be talking about a good chunk of the game, including its story, so if you haven't played it, you've got my blessing to hop out at any point. But I'm not your dad, and you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do. Okay, so I said my preamble, let's begin. If I had to pick one word to describe what I find so captivating about the game, it would be focus. Conveyed by the game's director, Fumito Ueda's philosophy of design by subtraction, stripping away parts that don't contribute to the core experience, while the remaining bits strengthen the whole. Expressed in a way that I don't see many games pursue, and how comfortable it is being quiet. The intro video highlights this, a 4-minute scene where the main character travels on horseback, with the only audio being the song Prologue to the Ancient Land. And the tone is conveyed, melancholy with a sense of mystery as the days pass to the game's location, the Forbidden Lands. And as you start the game, another companion is revealed, a corpse. The player character, referred to as Wanderer, will travel the Forbidden Lands and slay the 16 Colossi, pieces of the mysterious entity Dorman sealed away and forming a life of their own. Once destroyed, the woman will arise from the dead. Yet this is agreed upon knowing the young man will pay for this deed, a consequence he immediately accepts. What I find makes this so compelling is the lack of specifics. We don't truly know the Wanderer, nor his relationship with the woman, the sacrifice of a cursed fate, or the entity we have come to bargain with. But what is known is this act is defilement by the village elder. No one should dare step foot in these lands, not even for the promise of reviving a soul from the dead. And yet, the Wanderer still travels with his trusty steed Agro to the end of the world to save another. There's just enough info for the setup, while vague enough to fill in the gaps. Your interpretation may vary, and that's where the intrigue comes in. For the rest of the game, the Wanderer won't speak any lines besides calling his steed. Even with that, he's a character I find myself thinking about constantly. One of the most compelling in the medium for me, mainly for how well the game gets you to embody him. The Forbidden Lands itself is haunting. It's this wide open space with forests, cliffs, waterlogged ruins, and impressions of old civilizations that have come and gone. Like in the 14th fight, you walk through this lost city covered in foliage, and as you move through, making shortcuts and leading the beast, the sense of place is humbling. People once walked through these streets, and you're now running through and their time has passed. This is all communicated with no dialogue. It's just an impression to think on. And you might just be thinking about it, because as you travel across the land, using the sun and your ancient sword as a compass to the next fight, all you hear is the galloping of Agro's footsteps, the harsh blowing winds, and whatever nature is around you. There's no ambient music to listen to. It's the organic sounds of nature. That's your playlist for most of the game. The land feels empty. There's no comfort or reassurance you're supposed to be having a good time. You're here for a purpose. It's indifferent to the Wanderer, even as the player. The map is more an interlude to each fight. Exploration is for its own sake. I find this so refreshing. Open worlds have become a genre that have been quite popular, and if you're watching this, I bet you can name a few right off the top of your head. In most, I can remember how they're paired with a checklist of things to do, activities completed, collectibles broken down in each section of an expansive map, or a percentage tracker tallying how much of the game you've experienced. With the Forbidden Lands being a stage for the game rather than a playground, it feels lean as open worlds go, and it's that heightened focus I pleasantly think back to. Without the additional objectives, I get to appreciate the landscape itself, that long stone bridge on the way to the second boss, or that greenery with the fourth fight, the lake with a large disc during the third, or the expansive desert of the 13th, the arena of the 15th, the list goes on. The only collectibles are fruits you can shoot down to increase max health and these glowing lizard tails to increase your grip gauge, often found at these shrines where you can heal and save the game. And their upgrades the game doesn't talk much about. I remember stumbling across it after playing for a bit. And while there's an item that lets you track them down during the time attack mode, it's more subtle. Take that as you will. The emptiness of the Forbidden Lands is what I find makes it so compelling. Besides the intrigue, besides its moments of beauty, there's also a tension, the kind that creeps slowly in the back of your skull. There's no souls to meet, no merchant or fellow traveler, no helpful friend back in home base. The closest to that lies on stone. There's a saying we often see ourselves through other people. That lack of others can be uncomfortable. The Forbidden Lands is like walking through the Garden of Eden alone, and in that quiet, without a talking companion may remind you, you should not be here. And if the thought is the mental conflict, the Colossi are happy to embody the physical kind. The Colossi are the foes that make Shadow of the Colossus what it is. 16 bosses that you're expected to defeat. When I first played this game, and still find impressive today, is the scale. The foes are often these large titans that shake the earth with each step. Each movement stirs the environments they inhabit, like the 12th creating large bursts of water, or moving piles of sand in the 9th. Even the smaller ones that are closer to Wanderer's size are violent creatures that will constantly beat while you're down. Your character can't match these foes on equal footing. Every battle is a struggle. With the larger foes, you have to climb on these tufts of fur, find handholds in stone as it tries to throw you off, and the grip gauge has you invested, cautious, and most likely impatient. As you cling on, the circle begins to deplete, and if it runs out, usually paired with a sound cue, your character plummets no matter the distance. Gravity is indifferent to your progress. Movement-wise, it can be so frustrating. You just need to move a few inches, but this giant ogre-looking fool is going through this third cycle of the shoulder roll, and you're impatiently going, come on dude, I have places to be, like the top of your head, let's pick up the pace, as the circle is depleting to its last moments. Especially playing the time attack mode, this is tomahawk throwing controller levels of infuriating. Yet, thematically, at the risk of sounding pretentious, I believe it also works. The creatures are these lumbering beasts, and as you progress through their builds, you get this moment-to-moment of how insignificant your character is, thrown and tumbles around as he's trying to get his footing, like a flea trying to take down a lion. The ancient sword is a core piece of your arsenal. Besides being an old-school compass, it also marks where the major sigils holding the foe's essences are. But what's also funny is your character is no Miyamoto Musashi. He throws his entire bodies into swings. I could do better, and that's awful. So he pivots. It's not a slashing weapon, but a piercing kind. He'll go home alone, treating like the nail that impales the organic tissue of a burglar, and often one stab isn't enough. He's going in for seconds, thirds, however long it takes. That also requires stamina as the camera zooms in and he stabilizes himself, ensuring all his strength is going into that attack. That leads me to one of the parts upon reflection I find makes this game so unique. When I played similar games, oftentimes a selling point was they do bosses like Shadow of the Colossus. Here's a gargantuan foe, go beat it up. Especially in the 7th generation of console games, that shebang like Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, Darksiders 2, or Dragon's Dogma. Even now, with stuff like the From Software games, which the president of the company, Hidetaka Miyazaki, publicly states the predecessor game, Ico, was what got him into the game industry. Here's this huge opponent, do your thing. And those games can be cool, man. It took me 4 playthroughs to better grasp what makes these fights feel so distinct from those. And I would say because they're more like puzzles than duels. Hit him in the weak spot is a tale as old as time, but that's the end goal. You gotta figure out the steps before that. It's never that simple. Even the smaller ones will humble you of that notion pretty quick. The tools at your disposal are as follows. You've got a sword that functions like a nail and a compass. There's a bow you're quite skilled with. You've got your bare hands that can climb and whistle, and occasionally the arena is big enough for your trusty steed Aggro. That's what you're working with. Each piece has multiple uses and not just a one-off encounter, and that's strengthened knowing its implementation is based on how clever the user is. It gets you into the Wanderer's headspace. You're the underdog and have to figure out how to make your limited arsenal work against these creatures the size of a bank in a metropolitan area. Playing as the Wanderer is more like Perseus defeating Medusa in Greek mythology than Dante from Devil May Cry. Like, take the 8th fight with the Lizard Colossi. You're in this tower-like section with a bunch of staircases and windows. It climbs all over the walls and will shoot lightning and these poison gas attacks. And I remember being stuck on this fight for like 40 minutes. I didn't understand what I was supposed to do. I couldn't get to the weak point and figured it was some kind of bug, which is stupid because it's clearly a lizard. But what you're supposed to do is get across from it, notice the glowing legs, and shoot them with your bow, a weapon that isn't focused so much on damage but as a projectile to throw a creature off balance. Succeeding has it topple onto its backside where you can jump down and attack the weak spot. Rinse and repeat as needed. That comment about whistling may sound like a joke, but it's useful. During the 4th fight, there's this creature that's based on a Kirin with these long legs that are impossible to get to normally. So you lead it towards one of these underground ruins to get its attention, and as it's making its way over, you travel through to the other side, and as it's lowering itself trying to find you, climb to its vulnerable area. Sometimes these things get combined like the 10th and 13th, and even the humanoid ones that get used about 4 times have different flavors of how they fight, but also how to clash with them. There's a level of skill involved to execute these tactics, but the core is knowing the tricks to expose these colossi. It creates this interesting dichotomy. Compare the quiet of traveling to each spot, and then with the fights, the music begins and it becomes this gradual experience as a whole, perhaps a slow build-up or sudden strike of tension as this titan is locking eyes with you, triumphant once you've gotten the edge in a battle. One of my favorites is the 5th Colossi. You travel to this place surrounded by fog, saying goodbye to aggro as you take a dip into the water. And swimming in this game freaks me out. The way the camera is set up as the Wanderer only takes a tiny portion of the bottom left and the black abyss below creates this fear that a giant creature is going to emerge from the depths and eat you. It's terrifying. And while it never happens, I still feel that unease that it could. It's the kind of fear the mind creates that often rattles us the most. So as you swim, you get this cinematic introduction. This giant bird flying around the lake is the next foe as the music begins to play this tense and mysterious theme. Same end goal, but tiny problem. It's a bird. How are you supposed to stab it? And then you notice the platforms held up from under the water, and you remember you have a bow. So you pull back arrows, trying to determine the trajectory and the movements of the creature, or just fire wildly and hope for the best. And then you notice it turn in the sky as it begins barreling towards you, and a slight anxiousness kicks in. Okay, what now? And then you notice the fur offering the perfect spot to grab. Then it becomes the excitement like a roller coaster reaching all the way up to the top before making that expected plummet. And then the music changes to this dramatic and epic piece with brass and drums and even some vocals, and it becomes the coolest. You're hanging on for dear life as this creature flies across the sky, its wings offering you weak points to exploit, and becomes this exhilarating experience where you're picking your moments to move off the fur to this no man's land before getting to the grabbable wing spot. And that transition might just knock you off, plummeting back to the water to do it all again. And in playing this push and pull between the two of you as the music takes all these bits and turns it into one of the coolest things you may have ever played. The setup, the multiple stages of the fight, and that finale where you land the final blow and then everything just stops. A haunting piece plays as your foe topples to the ground, given a few seconds to move before shadow tendrils enter your character, knocked unconscious before returning to the temple for the next fight. I mentioned earlier I find the Wanderer to be one of the most compelling characters in the medium, and that's for how well Shadow the Colossus puts you in his position. On this recent playthrough, I was still so impressed with how the game pulls this off. Not only in the headspace with combat or the vague mission, but even during fights, this guy is so persistent. Think about it. He's traveling through this land fighting foes you should not win against. Fingers and knuckles bloodied from overuse. Every time he gets knocked down, he lays on the ground for a long period of time before pulling himself up with all his strength and resuming a fight, like a boxer preventing a loss from the countdown. Fatigue shown when resuming a game and seeing him slumped near a shrine. And in a visual aspect that is one of my favorite details in the game. As you slay the Colossi, the physical toll appears on the Wanderer. The bright red hair in his clean tunic proceeds to become dirtied, complexion more pale with bits of black popping through the skin, and that hair now darkened. This is never told to you, but shown. You may catch this and witness that consequence Dorman mentioned slowly revealing itself. And yet, the Wanderer picks himself up without complaint, climbs onto Aggro, and journeys to the next spot. In the quiet moments with these two, I find myself sympathizing with the character. This won't end well for him, yet the goal must be seen through. Replaying it again, I started to pick up the Wanderer is the aggressor in most fights. The Colossi keep to themselves and only attack when he intrudes upon their home. Some won't even attack unless you strike first, like the Hawk. Increasing your grip gauge requires lizard tails, which can be shot off if you aim carefully at that section, severing the attachment or just killing them. Fruits are shot off of trees. All of these things involve the Wanderer taking from the land itself. For his goal, these are necessary steps, and as a player, you might find yourself engaged with that. I absolutely was. The Wanderer keeps to himself, but I wanted him to succeed, damn the consequences, and wondered how it was going to pan out with men traveling to the lands hunting him down. And it's that finale that sucker punches you right in the gut. It's an ending that is tragic, beautiful, and really showed me what storytelling through games could be. Once again, I gotta stress here, I'm gonna talk about that final fight and the ending, so if you haven't, do yourself a favor and experience that on your terms. I'd hate to ruin this for you. Okay, that was the final warning. Here we go. At this point, you slay nearly every foe, pulling yourself up 15 times from the ancient temple's floor, reminded of the goal right in front of you. And then you head to the final Colossi. Aggro has been your trusty steed through the game, your companion helping you navigate through these lonesome lands. Controlling the horse can be frustrating at first. She does these wide turns and it's not very accessible. It really conveys that you're controlling a horse and not just an increase in movement speed. You'll be in a fight and the Wanderer will be shouting for Aggro as she's running across the map because she's a horse and this giant creature is shooting projectiles at you. When you get the feel of movement with Aggro, it becomes amazing. Like the Sandworm boss, where on horseback, you're shooting its eyes as it's chasing you. Or one of the most visually spectacular fights, the 13th. As sand is flying all around, you lower the creature shooting these balloon-like sacks, and as you're controlling Aggro, the Wanderer stands on his steed as he jumps onto the Colossi before it flies back into the air. Aggro becomes not just a mount, but a partner. You win fights with her help, and as a player, you may grow a connection to her. She's one of the few things with a heartbeat here and shown to be fiercely loyal. You might even pet Aggro from time to time just to show you appreciate her. This is the relationship you may have had with this horse. So when you find this stone bridge, you climb onto Aggro and the two of you cross. This scene wrecks me every time I see it. A key reason for that is how abrupt it occurs. A few seconds where everything is fine, and that final stone breaks apart as Aggro immediately bucks you off to safety as she plummets. There's no final words as you're cradling her in your arms. Wander screams out as his only friend submerges with the rocks in the water below. And as he mourns, realizing the consequences have been inflicted on his companion, not just himself, you feel it too. Sure, Aggro is just a horse, but that doesn't make it hurt less. It's like a dog, you never have to guess if they care about you. It's so apparent, and that purity is beautiful, and you wouldn't have gotten this far as you did without her. It's a powerful moment where the story and the gameplay dovetail here. When you call her, it's just a whistle that is never given a response. The two of you will never see each other again. So the wanderer climbs, the wind picks up, and storm clouds begin to form as the desperation builds. This is the final obstacle. And seeing that foe is foreboding. The final boss, Malus, stands at a colossal 48 meters. For a comparison, the Statue of Liberty without the pedestal stands at 46. Imposing doesn't do this justice. As soon as the stationary foe sees you, it shoots projectiles. The fight is arduous, winding through underground tunnels as shots shake the ground, loop around as you sneak right below its legs and make your ascent. Feels more like scaling a mountain than a boss fight. Taking multiple steps from stabbing his back to then jumping onto his hand, scale up, jump on a left arm and then attack the shoulder, jump there and make a final trek to his head and finish the job. Easier said than done, of course, as I would constantly fall right back to the beginning step. And as I would miss a jump or run out of grip going through another cycle of the same repeating animation, I would get so pissed. Both mechanically, but I found worked in the narrative. I was right at the home stretch, and I kept fumbling right when the end was in sight. I would express my error of my skill issue, but I would also get upset at this foe. Aggro died because of you. If you weren't there, this wouldn't have happened. You're the reason she's dead. But the most chilling part about the fight is something minor but telling. It's indifference. The first attacks are like seeing an ant and squishing it, not out of hatred, but because it's an insect that's in your home. When you're right near the top, standing on its hand, it just stares at you. There's no malice in it, more curious at your existence, spotting something so tiny and persistent it dumbfounds him enough to stop fighting you. That feeling isn't mutual, and you take your opportunity. Finish the fight once and for all. A good ending is an art. Take any type of performance, and that flourish when the curtain falls can bring it home. The audience's responses run from delight, anger, confusion, sheer awe, anything goes. I can remember the emotions I felt playing out that ending in Shadow of the Colossus that first time and still do. The first was pity. As the travelers arrive at the ancient temple, they look in horror at the wanderer, the ritual nearly complete, horns growing out of the skull, skin paled and having the consistency of gloppy paper mache, struggling to walk. The second was anger. They admonish the man, calling him a foolish boy and highlighting his moral failing, and they proceed to execute him, putting the wanderer out of his misery. I could tell the game was effective because I found myself furious at these old knobs. They had no idea what he had to go through to achieve this, using everything from limited equipment, physical strength, and persistence from the indomitable human spirit. As the player, we shared this journey, saw the cost, paid more than what was expected, and kept going. And in this final moment, that was being torn away. They would never know what this took, only the blasphemous sin in front of them. Which leads to the next, wrath. When the shadows form around Wanderer as we embody Dorman, brought whole, I eagerly press the buttons to throw an attack at these trespassers, before transitioning to begrudging acceptance. Dorman was massive, granted impressive, but too big to be moving around the temple like the others, now grabbing the ancient sword and throwing it into a pool to seal us away. My blows weren't doing anything. The end was sealed. Replaying this years later, I would throw a good haymaker or two. It's not every day you get to be a kaiju, and by God, I'm going to savor it. But I did so knowing nothing would change. Yet, I would still try at that last bit. Covered in shadow, you embody Wanderer one last time. As he's pulled into the pool, the music upon slaying Colossi returns. You can fight with all of your might, grab onto the floor, and hang on for dear life. But it's a struggle you can't win. The indomitable human spirit is quite the feat, but you're not really human anymore, and that grip gauge is running on fumes. And when he enters that room, we depart from the Wanderer. He'll never know Dorman honored their end of the deal, returning Mona to life, or Aggro limping all the way back to the ancient temple. For all he knows, he failed. That tragedy is the part that sticks with me. All that he went through was a victory he would never know. The game doesn't give you a pat on the back for a job well done, it sucker punches the expectation it was going to end happily. And I'm a sucker for a happy ending from time to time, but I find it valuable to have the downers too. It makes you appreciate the good and often have a strong takeaway. Maybe something profound about the human condition, or just knowing art has moved you in a way that's hard to articulate. But I think back to that line the Wanderer says to Dorman, "It doesn't matter." The specifics weren't needed. While he never got to see it, he won, and now reborn as a creature of man and demon. Over the years, I've said goodbye to Wanderer every time I roll credits, but he's never left. I think about this character a lot, my perspective of him changing. First, from how awesome this character was design-wise, to a tragic hero, to a man who did what he thought was right, damn the consequences. Shadow of the Colossus is a video game that grows with me. A work I am so stupid lucky to have played as early as I did and helped shape my taste. One of my favorite parts about it is the mystery. While it's confirmed to be a prequel to Ico, there's enough distance to not explain things. The Forbidden Lands don't need paragraphs about its history or lore on Dorman's origins. Mona's cursed fate isn't explored and her relationship with Wander isn't stated. The vagueness enhances the work. It's a sentiment the director has gone on record saying the player's takeaway is the most important one. It strips away most standard parts of game design, like a large HUD, skill trees, weapon upgrades, or an overly explained narrative. What's left over supports the whole. And while there are parts I find frustrating about it from time to time, it's still one of the coolest games I've ever played. And I'll continue to load my PlayStation years later and meet the Wanderer and Aggro again as they cross the bridge to the Forbidden Lands. While I'm happy that games are becoming more mainstream and people get to enjoy the hobby more, I notice an insecurity to present the medium in a similar way. From trying to mimic the prestige of film, highlight famous actors bringing characters to life, or gameplay that's a vehicle for a story, than being a part of it. Shadow of the Colossus is my go-to that games can be so much more than that. And another reason I wanted to make this video, besides sharing it with people who care about this medium like I do, is because I don't want it to be forgotten. Sometimes I worry that in this era where there's so much out there, and often what gets attention are the people or products that shout the loudest, works that carry on with a quiet confidence will be forgotten. And maybe by the general public? Yeah, that's a solid possibility. But for others, it might mean a lot more. And that could and has snowballed throughout the industry for decades to come. If you watched this far, that just goes to show that's a silly thing I'm worrying about. Thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. Drink plenty of water, take care of yourself, and more videos to come. Have a good one.